Hi, my name is Jos Smolders, and this is Thursday Afternoon Talks. This time, we discuss Oculi Mortuus, a book and a CD released by Michael Esposito and Mauricio Reyes. Frans, this time we discuss a CD release which came with a...
No. It's a USB device, okay. Limited edition, I think 30 copies. And
30 only?
Yeah, I think 30.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's on Bandcamp. So, you already reviewed it for Vital. So tell me about it. What was your opinion on the release?
It's called Oculi Mortuus, which sounds rather gothic, but it isn't. And it means dead eyes. Mm-hmm. It's a release by Mauricio Reyes and Michael Esposito. Mm-hmm. And the first person, Mauricio Reyes, I know because he organized a remix of the 24-hour Live Inge Beethoven stretched piece, the Ninth Symphony, and that's the remix. He chopped up in segments of 2 hours and gave 12 people 2 hours to remix, and I was one of them, so that's why I know him. And Michael Esposito is somebody who I believe, I'm not actually sure, is his great whatever grandfather was Samuel Morse,
okay,
who invented the Morse code, but also worked with building machinery to capture the voice of the dead. The electronic voice phenomena, EVP, as we shall henceforth call them. And Michael still goes to places where people are dead, like graveyards, and also abandoned hospitals and whatever. And he makes recordings in which he claims to hear EVP, and I heard some of those, and they are wildly obscure, and yet also
in the sense of that they are.
Well, you don't hear people saying "Oh, mother" or whatever. Yeah. But it's fascinating stuff. I find that sort of thing fascinating. Whether or not I believe in it is a completely different thing.
Of course.
But yeah, it's sound matter, so always interesting, and it's a good story. So that's also interesting. The story here, Oculi Mortuus, is about William Burroughs, and it's I see it as a radiophonic work. It's about an hour long, and it starts with a voice telling us about the death of Joan Vollmer.
Vollmer. Yeah, that was his wife.
Yes, William Burroughs' wife, and he shot her by accident in a sort of Willem Tell.
Yeah, maybe we should explain a bit about that, because Burroughs has been married for a period of time, and the booklet that accompanies the release tells a bit about her life. So it concentrates more on the wife of Burroughs than on Burroughs' self. It explains about how after she married, the marriage was a bit of a shambles, as much as I understand. There was some reason why the couple had to move to Mexico for a period, and the shambles became even bigger when they were in Mexico. They were partying, and at a very drunken hash-induced party, they suddenly decided that they would do a William Tell act, where Joan Velmer put something on her head, and Burroughs was supposed to shoot the apple or the beer glass of whatever it was from her head. And lo and behold, something went wrong, and he shot her in the forehead. So that's the story that's behind this.
Yes, yeah. And then this is explained in the beginning of this piece, a little bit like a coroner report, and it morphs into this whole thing about EVPs, about Brian Geisen, cut up Burroughs himself, and they take his voice and this snippets of a lecture that it drifts in and out of this piece, and you can think about this as a work of cut-ups, really.
Right.
And it's cut-ups is a thing that a lot of people use in music, and then I'm not sure if it's used a lot in writing these days. I have no idea.
No,
maybe you know.
I don't know. No, I mean I can. I think it's an excellent method to use in poetry. And actually, Burroughs himself told once that he thought that T.S. Eliot's *The Wasteland* was one of the first cut-up pieces that have ever been written. But currently, I don't know if there are many novel writers or experimental writers using it. I can imagine they do, but it's not advertised as such. I mean,
Really?
No.
Oddly enough, I must admit, I read a lot, but not a lot of fiction. Yeah, and also there's a lot of transformation, I assume, of these voices with computer technology. So there's a whole layer of electronic sound that is also drifting along with this. So this is sort of a release that piqued my interest in a cut up again, which it's not something I think about a lot anymore. It's more like, for me, more like something from the past.
Yes,
where you when we were all dabbling with tape loops and cassettes and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And also Burroughs himself was perhaps more of interest for me in, I don't know, 40 years ago, than it is now.
Yeah.
But maybe because everybody was talking about it.
But do you know, we'll talk about this cut-up in a moment, but when we focus again on the release, what is the central theme of the release? Actually, is it Burroughs? Is it Vollmer? Is it EVP? Or what is it actually trying to bring across? Because I mean, there's this booklet. There's also this correspondence about with the estate of Burroughs about the using of his voice. EVP and Cut Up, does it have a relationship for these two gentlemen, or what's your vision?
I think that, as far as I know, EVP is also part of Burroughs' interest.
Right.
It's very hard to say. I think they want to tell us something about this little-known story about the wife of Burroughs.
Right.
That's the point where it all gets going, and I think it's also the point. One of the reasons why they don't get permission to from the estate to use name Burroughs,
right?
Because it's emphasized on this rather unfortunate accident.
Yeah.
So
I can
imagine.
Did you know that Burroughs only started writing his books and novels after this incident?
That is, and it's something I didn't know. I do know he was a journalist when he started.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware that he until you told me that he started writing his books later.
Yeah. So I can imagine that this incident, although he has always sort of steered away in interviews from questions about it, it must have been a crucial moment in his development. And indeed, I mean, he has always also, he has always had a fascination with death. He has written books about death, about natives, how they, Native Americans, how they dealt with death. I think that indeed, when you say EVP was an important topic for Burroughs, this might have to do with maybe his starting to write after the incident, and perhaps getting to terms with this incident, and trying to somehow connect with the dead. I mean, it's pure speculation, of course, but
there might be a sort of ritual aspect behind it. Yes, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's all pure speculation, of course.
You heard the piece. What do you think? What is it about?
I wasn't sure. I mean, to me, EVP also has to do with a lot of interpretation. I mean, yes. I mean, I've heard recordings, EVP recordings as well, and I find it a bit like with all seance topics. I find it very hard to go along with it. So, like you said, it's interesting, it's fascinating, but in the end, I think it's sort of a carnival act. All of that. No, I mean, when you listen to EVP recordings, what is it that you get from that? There's no conversation. There's sort of voices, but you cannot interact. It's when you hear people talk to the ghost, you don't hear any direct response. I mean, it's
for me, it also belongs to the world of superstition and religion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something you, I think, choose to believe or reject.
Yes.
So, like I said, I have no idea if it's real or not. But then again, that is part of the story, and that's also here. And in this case, they'll say, we've. I think they went to Mexico, to that specific site, and did recordings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's something you can't check. You don't know.
I mean, You don't have to check it. I mean, it's just okay. You go along with the story or not? And when I listen to the piece, I've listened to parts of it. I think it's an interesting radio play.
Yeah, it's a sort of non-narrative that still makes you. Well, made us look into Burroughs, into the wife, into the accident.
Yeah,
thinking about because we talked beforehand a bit about cut-ups in music, which is, I don't know in your case, but like I said, it's not something I work on it as much as I did. That I got endlessly random tapes or all of this sort of random things I did in the past.
No, I mean I did a lot of. When I read Burroughs in the early 80s, I started late 70s to Junkie was the first book I read. And then I learned more about Burroughs in the 80s and I read Naked Lunch and the books that are from that period. And of course I learned about his cut-up techniques, which I found very interesting because when I started to with sound and music myself, I used a very old tape recorder and a cassette recorder, and I was actually cutting sound up. So that was the idea that Burroughs did this in a literary context. And then I started to record also voices, not only parts of music that I collated after cutting them up, but so cut up was in a musical sense very interesting to me in a musical context, but when I read Naked Lunch, I must admit that I found it very hard to read it from front to back cover. And so that's what you get with some very interesting concepts. I mean, the idea is interesting, and the idea behind cut-up technique is also very interesting. But the actual execution and the result of the execution is a completely different matter, of course. Perhaps you can listen to a fragment where Francis Bacon interviewed Burroughs about the idea behind the cut-up. Then we can hear the man's voice itself.
It's to a point that these juxtapositions between what you're thinking if you're walking down the street and what you see, life is a cut-up. Every time you walk down the street or look out the window, your consciousness is cut by random factors, and then you begin to realize that they're not so random, that this is saying something to you.
I mean,
There's no such thing as coincidence.
But when you'd actually done, on a literary level, you'd reassembled your own work, other people's work, and so on.
Whereas I may make a cut-up, and out of 10 pages use a sentence.
So you simply wait until coincidence gives you something artistically good in your terms.
Absolutely.
I see. So you use coincidence not just to be random, but as a tool of the artist.
Oh, absolutely.
I see.
Yes.
So that was Burroughs explaining about how he, by cutting up, and this is my interpretation, sort of created he created a situation from which he could derive the sentences that he used to write in his novels or in his books, and that must have been quite a hell of a job. And actually, I find it a bit strange because the way I have seen an explanation about how Naked Lunch was created, and there it was explained to me quite. It was explained to me that it actually was just cutting up written typed folio leaves, which were sort of scrambled and then collated again, and then the resulting left part of the sentence on the left side of the page was collated to the sentence on the right side of the cut. So, but Burroughs here, he is much more, well, the process as he explains it here is much more elaborate. So, and in a sense, makes more sense too in a creative, artistic perspective.
Yeah,
but
a very time consuming job. Why not write a story?
Yeah. Well, he was interested, of course, in I mean, the fact that he did not think about it himself, that he sort of received messages from somewhere in a sphere outside himself or outside of humanity, was of course something that interested him very much. In a sense, you could say it was sort of delivered from a deity to him. And in a sense, that also has a lot to do with EVP, because perhaps he, by writing up words and sentences, cutting them up and collating them again, thought that some sort of divinity or I don't know how to describe it, but that the circumstance that he created himself and the indeterminacy of that situation could deliver him secret messages, and he was always working with that. If you read the book of Genesis P. Orridge, P. Orridge he knew Burroughs. He met with Burroughs very early on when Burroughs was living in London.
And they did a record on
right, of course. Exactly, on industrial records, which still is one of the best recordings as far as I'm concerned. But in that book, he describes a situation where I'll try and read it, where you can read about how words and recordings also were for Burroughs a way to connect with the spirit world, as it were. So what I quote from Genesis P. Orridge's book: "I used to eat at the Mocha Bar on Frisk Street," he said, "but they were always rude to me, unfriendly, so I had to curse the place." So he is Burroughs. Then William proceeded to tell me how he had cursed the bar, using his cut-up magic technique. First, he walked back and forth past the Mocha Bar on the outside, again and again, with his cassette recorder slung over his shoulder, making a recording of all the ambient street sounds. Honking horns, shouts from passers-by, the tinkling of a bell as a shop door opened, a dog barking somewhere, the sound of a distant jet overhead. Once back home, he began to cut in by randomly recording what he called trouble noises, ominous negative sounds recorded from his TV, gunshots, police sirens, warfare, bombs exploding, buildings being demolished, screams of fear, loud swearing, crying, fire engines. Once he had cut these sounds into his original ambient recording, he went back to Frisk Street. He played his edited trouble tape as loud as possible while he again walked up and down past the notorious cafe.
That must have been the great sight.
That was the curse that he
it's also, it's also the story behind the film Decoder.
Yeah,
the German movie where they record the music in the bar or restaurant or whatever.
Yeah,
and then cut it up and feed it back as sort of negative energy, I think.
Yeah.
That's the same sort of thing. Yeah.
According to
curse your enemy.
According to Genesis P. Orridge, the curse also worked because within weeks the Mocha Bar was closed and suddenly out of business, never to reopen. The building became a ghost, dooming any business attempt to instant failure. So, well, it's funny. If it was true, it's not so funny because, I mean, you never wish someone to be cursed, but it's a nice example of how Burroughs use these mediums as a means to bring the ghost world, the spirit world, into his output and into his life, actually.
Into the real world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oddly enough, when I was about 15, 16 years old, I heard about Burroughs because I was reading music magazines and people were referencing it. Mm-hmm. And the only book that the library had where I lived was Junkie in Dutch, I think.
In Dutch? Wow.
I think it was in Dutch, yeah. And as far as I remember. So I borrowed it because I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to be revealed something of high interest. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what it was about.
No.
And I think I tried another book, Last Words of Dutch Schultz.
Dutch Schultz, yeah. No.
Well, maybe Electronic Revolution. I have that's also published in Dutch. Mm-hmm. That I more or less understood, and this is I think where he also explains this sort of technique of recording and feeding recordings back.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, when I'm talking about it now, I think, I mean, I'm wiser than I was in my 20s, of course. Perhaps we should not try to take it on a literal level, but more on a subconscious level.
Oh, he would love that.
Absolutely, he would love that. I'm not sure I will try that, but well, maybe.
All of this sort of thing eventually had influence on a lot of people.
Absolutely,
you and me included. What we learned from it, I still use the random approach when if I make a tape loop because I have some reel-to-reel machines.
Yeah,
I don't follow the official technique. Like, I'm gonna fast forward and rewind and make exact cut. No, I just got a piece of tape and stick sounds on it. That takes a while, and then this is something I can use.
Yeah, but for me it's the same, and I mean in the digital world, of course, it's super easy to do this even at a very high quality, which perhaps even is the wrong approach to perhaps we shouldn't even go for the highest quality, but just the lowest quality, and perhaps some ghost enters the rippling of the conversion into a very bad MP3 quality or something. But anyway, I was thinking, I mean, in the early 80s, there were, of course, a lot of bands influenced by this technique. And one of the bands that I that came up with me immediately was Cabaret Voltaire and Hafler Trio. And do you have any other examples of where I mean, but with Cabaret Voltaire and Hafler Trio, it's very obvious.
Throbbing Gristle.
Throbbing Gristle, of course.
There's a lot of Peter Christopherson used a lot of tapes in Throbbing Gristle music. Also, the whole Martin Denny lounge music, I think, or whatever it's called, being slowed down and cut up, and that sort of thing. So
Nurse with Wound, of course, and Current 93. That's that kind of bands.
Early Current 93.
Yeah, of course, not the latter one. And
that touches upon the whole surrealist thing, which we can talk about another time.
Another time, yes. So I think we've discussed this. I think we discussed this topic properly.
The one thing I want to say about this particular release by Mauricio Reyes and Michael Esposito is that it's on a USB drive. It's a big one. But like I wrote in a review that I would like to have two versions of this piece. So one as it is now, with all of spoken word, but as a lot of these spoken word things, I would not choose easily to play it again because of the spoken word. If there's an instrumental version,
an instrumental edit.
I would have loved to see that with all the voices removed. And have it as a more single electronic piece of music.
Okay, because that instrumental part in itself for you has enough.
Quality
artistic,
to stand on its own.
Okay.
And that's also because but it's just me. When there's a lot of talking, you cannot escape it, and music for me has other sort of functions.
I understand.
Listen. And a voice always is more demanding. You have to listen to this. You have to be aware. You can't do anything.
No, and in a sense, of course, you know the story at a certain point, and then the story doesn't need to be told again and again and again. So, in a sense, I understand what you mean. So, and of course, on Bandcamp, it's very easy to add another track, and perhaps they take it too hard.
Yeah, it's a lovely item. It looks great in a box with black feathers.
But there are only 30 items. 30.
I think it was limited 30 copies. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So collector's item already, I suppose. Okay, thanks, Frans. I loved this conversation. Let's listen to another part of this USB, hopefully with the consent of both the authors. And I'll speak to you next week.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.